Slide 248. I got bounced. I got bounced off that video. It was just gone. I don't know why. All right. 17.3. I don't know if you saw this or not, so I'll say it again. It's important. Wilson collapsed in Colorado on this big tour, this train tour, from physical nervous exhaustion, and days later he had a stroke that paralyzed half of his body. That was it. That was it. Lodge developed these 14 reservations to the treaty, hoping to protect American sovereignty from the League of Nations. As this is showing, is that this is a very important piece of the puzzle for the League of Nations. The USA needs to be in there, and we will not be in there. We don't put that piece in. Is a nation willing to have the youth of America ordered to war by the League of Nations? Henry Cabot Lodge, who was opposed to the League of Nations, he said that it made our sovereignty not happen because the League of Nations could order our people to war. And he did not believe in that. A lot of people did not believe in that. Okay, so the U.S. Constitution focused on collective security by requiring members to work together and supply troops to keep peace. This article was the main concern of the Senate. People feared that this would draw the U.S. into war without congressional approval. Wanted Article 10 changed to say that the U.S. could only supply troops with congressional approval, that we have to say yes. They can't say yes for us. And they tried to get Roosevelt to compromise, and he refused. And because he was stubborn and refused, it doesn't get passed. They reject it. They vote it down. Like he should have compromised. Article 10 of the treaty bound the U.S. to aid any member nation of the League victimized by another aggressor state. Congress wanted to preserve its war-declaring power. Rightfully so. Most people believe rightfully so. Lodge agreed to ratify a treaty if his 14 reservations were added. Wilson hated it, refused to change. I shall consent to nothing. The Senate must take its medicine. They did not. They did not take its medicine. They rejected it. So November 19, the Treaty of Versailles was defeated by the Republicans by 55 to 39 vote. 80% of senators liked the treaty. They liked it. They liked the Treaty of Versailles, but would only support it with Lodge's 14 reservations. And since Wilson wouldn't compromise, no can do. They won't do it. March 1920, the treaty was voted down again. A re-energized U.S. isolationist tradition contributed to the failure of the treaty. The treaty says that we should help other nations, friendly nations, and since we were now coming into a newly energized isolationist period, the 1920s, that was all the more reason that they rejected any imperialist type ideas. Wilson was mostly to blame because he was stubbornly wanted all or nothing, so he got nothing. These are famously the biggest mistakes made by presidents. James Buchanan failing to prevent civil war. Andrew Johnson screwing over former slaves during Reconstruction and giving plantation owners their slaves back. Lyndon Baines Johnson allowing the Vietnam War to intensify and drag on. He doesn't run for re-election, and he should have said, I'm taking people out of war, and then not run for re-election, but he doesn't. And he doesn't. So instead, we go all the way from 1968 to 1973, 5 more years of war. Whereas if he would have just taken us out of war, it would have saved a lot of lives. Woodrow Wilson, this that we're talking about. Richard Nixon, the Watergate break-in. James Madison, not keeping us out of the War of 1812. Thomas Jefferson, the Embargo Act of 1807, no idea. John F. Kennedy, authorizing the Bay of Pigs invasion. He gets a huge black eye. He looks terrible because of it. Bay of Pigs, that's Cuba. Ronald Reagan, the Iran-Contra scandal. He was a part of it, and he should have stayed out of it. And Bill Clinton, the Monica Lewinsky scandal. I think you probably all know about that. Okay, so the election of 1920, Harding, Coolidge, Hoover. It's going to be Harding. Republican victory in the election of 1920, combined with a renewed commitment to laissez-faire economics, the 1920s are pro-business. Back to pro-business and isolationist, staying out of foreign affairs. And isolation abroad saw the U.S. return to normalcy, conditions similar to those of the Gilded Age. The 1920s are a lot like the Gilded Age. Pro-business, pro-big business, Republican presidents. This return to normalcy because we've just been in a world war. That's why they called it the return to normalcy. even though we have Prohibition happening. Remember, Prohibition starts in 1919 or 1920 and goes all the way to 1933. That's a long time. Big gangs, a lot of gangsters, machine guns become the order of the day. Like, everybody still drinks alcohol. Okay. The election of 1920 gave Americans their first opportunity to vote based on their views of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. They vote Republican, which means that they were against Democrat Wilson. He's not running, but they're saying we don't agree with how Wilson acted during the war. A Democratic victory would have suggested general satisfaction with how the war ended, but it wasn't. It was a Republican victory. Teddy dies January 6th, 1919. Some sort of cardiac embolism or something like that in his heart. That's one of the most famous pictures of Teddy. Death had to take Roosevelt sleeping, for if he'd been awake, there would have been a fight. Harding. Republican Party was strong by 1920 and nominated Warren G. Harding for president in a smoke-filled room. That's famous. A long, long time ago, the conventions, all of that, it was still undetermined who was going to end up being the person running for president. They decided there. After a night-long meeting of Republican leaders in room 404 of the Bridgestone Hotel in Chicago, at the end of the night, Harding was the person that was going to run for president. The Democrats put James Cox forward and his VP, FDR. FDR is walking. FDR is walking. This is 1920. FDR is walking. He doesn't get polio until somewhere in his 30s or something like that. So I don't know what year that he can no longer walk. But as president, he's in a wheelchair for the entire presidency. 4 terms. 3.5. He dies like months into his 4th term. Harding won easily. Americans clearly felt war did not make the world safe for democracy, like Wilson said, but instead was fought to enrich big business. The desire for political isolation, 1920s, doomed the Treaty of Versailles and indirectly led to World War II. That's it. Bye. We start school full-time on Monday, Tuesday, after Labor Day. I hope I survive it. I hope we all survive it. I'm a little worried. I'm a little sad. Bye. Have a good Labor Day weekend.